Okay, brilliant. We can see you.
Yeah. How do I look?
Good. Cool jumper.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Look better, more exciting.
I'm never in front of the camera, you know. I'm always behind. It's good to you know, it's good to be able to do this. Thanks for the opportunity.
Hey, thanks for speaking to us. So I'll do a little introduction. So it's Conscious Isolation, live with the University of East London, and we have the wonderful Chuck Noble here to talk a little bit about his practice as a photographer. So Chuck, I'll let you, we'll kind of fire away with the first question. Can you talk a little bit about your practice and your career, please?
Well, as you know, I'm a fashion photographer. Fashion portrait. I do a little bit of documentary photography, art photography, photography in general. But you know, to get the bread and butter, I specialize in fashion and portraiture. But I love all aspects of photography. So you know, that's what I do. Obviously, over the these few months that we've been through, which has just been really tasking on everyone. I've been concentrating a lot on working on some art sort of projects, photography art projects, which will be hitting the airwaves very soon. So it's something I'm looking forward to. Just been keeping it on the DL for now, you know?
I feel like we're getting inside info there. Looking forward to seeing. And are you shooting predominantly digital, or do you shoot analog as well?
I shoot analog. I mean, for work, I do shoot digital. If a client requests me to shoot on film, then I will do that. But then also in my private, personal projects, I love shooting on film. There's something about the dynamic range that you get with film, and just this beautiful soulfulness that you get with film, which I think digital cameras, with all the technology that's been put into it, has still not been able to really get. There's something about the grain in film. There's something about the blacks, the whites. You know, it's just really bad. When I love it. So yeah, you know, I shoot both, but mostly digital at the moment, obviously.
And are you able to show us some of your work? You can do a screen share and just talk us through some of your some examples of your work, please.
Yeah. Now you guys have to bear with me, because as much as I'm a techie, this I am still trying to get grips to. What I can do is actually, because you've done the website thing before, where you went to my website. Maybe that's good with you. I do have some images here which were a mix, so I can pretty much do. I would have said a share screen from my Instagram, but because I'm doing it off my tablet, it's going to be sideways, so that won't work. But I can do my website. I also have some images from some documentary style images which I shot, which were obviously, we had the protests at the beginning of this year, which which were just powerful. I was in attendance and I had to capture that. I also have images from a couple of projects which I did, which one of them was a Brixton project which I did a few years ago. Brixton is one of my favorite parts of London, favorite areas of London, which has been undergoing massive changes. So I managed to capture images, of that whole enclave before it went through this total change, which is still going through now anyway. So you guys bear with me. Let me try and get this popping. Can you see me? Or is it still showing my screen? I'm not going to look like some old grandpa trying to
trying to access. They're not your screen yet.
Okay. All right. Just give me a sec.
No worries. Yeah.
Okay, so you good? Can you still see?
Now you can see me.
Okay, just give me a sec.
No worries.
All right, so this is the Brixton images, so this was a project which was quite dear to me. Can you guys see this? Can you see it?
Yeah.
All right, so these were images, a selection of images I shot over a couple of months, a month actually it's a 6-week period. And these were just images of people in Brixton. A lot of these I shot on film. Some I shot on digital, and these were images of people that live in Brixton, you know, the communities that Brixton, how they just went about their business. I was kind of like a fly on the wall, you know, not trying to get involved. Some images, obviously, I had direct shots of. A lot of them are just me, just sort of like capturing these moments in time in Brixton. And I have done these shoots in other parts of London too. So this is more the doc. This is before I get into sort of my fashion images, and you know, these are a lot of images which I really sort of love right here. The reason why I like to images like this, the reason why I like them in black and white, is they, you know, there's so much color in Brixton, which if you're using your naked eyes to look at it, it's, you know, it's amazing. But then once you start seeing them in images, it can get quite, you know, you can get sort of like confused with all these colors. But once an image is in black and white, then you know where to focus. It just, you know, you have a much more realistic view of what to focus on in the images. So I just love these shots right here. I remember, obviously, you did mention that I was a documentary photographer, which I am, as much as I like to call myself a fashion and portrait photographer work-wise. These are shots from Brixton right here. As you know, this image right here says a lot, as you can see. Can you see these clearly?
Yeah.
And this is Brixton Village. So Brixton Village, you know, the story of Brixton Village and how what's been happening with the community that lived in Brixton or still live in Brixton, and how pretty much priced out of Brixton itself, the markets, the new markets that were built there, or the new Brixton Village were built there, you know, the community were not able to afford to actually own shops in the market itself. So, you know, this whole gentrification thing was something I definitely wanted to capture in Brixton itself. I did. This set of images here were taken during, I think this was 2 years ago, when there was a lot going on with the property market, and how the original community, you know, the original integers of Brixton, how they're being priced out. They couldn't afford rent. You know, there was all these new properties that were being built, old ones knocked down, a lot of people being moved out of the neighborhood. So these protests went on for a few days at the time, and I covered images from that. And it's just, you know, it's a wonderful area. You know, people there, the culture there is just so rich. And I love that. Love that. These are one of my favorites here. So cancer housing, not affordable homes that no one can afford.
Very true.
No one can afford. It's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, everywhere. I'm not looking forward to seeing what's going to happen over the next couple of years. So this is Brixton Village itself. As you can see, that the protests happened in the actual village, or the market, which is called Brixton Village. And these were people protesting against the high rates, the high rent. They couldn't afford. And these are local, you know, local people from Brixton, where they couldn't afford to rent shops in this market, which they'd kind of grown up to be a part of. Yeah. Okay, so I'll show some more images from, before I go into my fashion images here. This was from the BLM, Black Lives Matter march, which we all know about, starting with Breonna Taylor, who we all know the story of, and which was still going through at the moment, across the pond, as they say. And this, for me, was also a very powerful couple of days or couple of weeks when we were going through these protests. I think there were so many great photographers who also covered this period right here. And it wasn't just about the images. Obviously, we wanted to to save these images so that people in the future could go back and come back and wherever they find them online or whatever, and they can know that this movement happened. 2020 I kind of see as a year of reckoning. It's almost like 2020 vision. You can see clearly this year. 400 years and still so many tears. Obviously, there's the argument that's always had between the term "all lives matter" as compared to Black Lives Matter. It's something that's quite controversial, if you want to call it that. No justice, no peace. So this time here is definitely a moment in my life that I would remember. The electricity was intense, to say the least. Did you attend any of the protests, marches?
I didn't, sadly. I wanted to. I was in Cambridge during lockdown and being quite careful about not travelling anywhere on public transport. So I will be sure to attend the next ones. Yeah. Oh. I was really nervous about the travel back then, but maybe not a good enough excuse. I tried to do as much as I could from home by, sharing the word about things and educating myself more.
Any way that we could use to represent during this period right here, when all these things were happening, some people could go to marches, some people had to do things online. Any means that we would have used at that time, and which we still do, it is a wonderful sort of thing to do anyway. A lot of people obviously couldn't have attended the marches, but they represented in their own way. Okay, so I'm going to go to my website, if I can pull that up from here. Just give me a second. So this is my site. Undergoing some revamps at the moment, so I do have some images on here, and a lot of my fashion work. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so old and new. I love black and white, as you can see. I'm quite the fan of black and white images. There's just something about what they do that I just love. Something rich about them, especially if you shoot on medium format. This is my good friend Susan, best friend who I work with a lot. It's very inspiring. And we always work on some amazing projects together. Cool. Okay, so do you have any more?
Yeah, I do. Do you want to, if you stop sharing your screen, you should pop back up again on the. Yeah, thanks for sharing your work. It's amazing. It's so powerful. My next question is, can you talk a little bit about your way into your career, your route in, and where you studied, and the journey into being a professional photographer, please?
Well, I've always been a creative. I've always been into photography. It's been a passion of mine ever since I was quite young. But I didn't start off as a photographer professionally anyway. I'd always sort of taken pictures as a hobby. You know, I've always been really sort of interested in life behind the lens and capturing moments. First time I graduated from university, it was in business and finance, and I went straight into working in the City of London, which I did for a short amount of years. And it was good. I really liked it. But then I just realized, you know, a few years in that it wasn't what I really wanted to do. What I really wanted to do was, you know, get into photography and just build myself up as a professional photographer. So when I did start, it was initially, you know, just kind of shooting for friends, doing little gigs here and there, and just sort of building up a portfolio at the time. But then also learning about the business side of photography, which I thought was really important. I thought to myself that, well, if I do want to make a career out of this, I can't just, you know, sort of blag my way through it. I really need to know not just how to take great pictures or good pictures, but I also need to know how to sell those images, how to, you know, pretty much make money off my images. So a few years in, I decided to go back to studying, you know, again, which I did, and I went to Kensington and Chelsea College of Art and then studied photography there under the tutelage of a wonderful professor, which is Bruce Tanner. And from there, he really, I think what I learned from that was more about, put it this way, prior to studying photography, I obviously knew how to take the pictures, but I didn't really delve into the history of photography. I didn't really delve into looking at the process, how it all started, and how, you know, photographers of the past, what they did and how they came about to creating the images which are now iconic images. And that's what studying photography did for me. So it got me back into looking at photographers, great photographers such as Norman Parkinson's, the Horst P. Horst, and, you know, even people like, there's so many other photographers, which there's so many. Sometimes I tend to forget their names, but as soon as I see their work and I'm like, bam, I know who that is. But then they're just great. So for me, I do have an affinity for a lot of the iconic work. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still enjoy a lot more recent. I mean, Tim Walker is one of my favorite photographers, more because he creates these fantastical images, which I look at and I envy, because, you know, just being able to have, you know, all the props and the locations that he's able to shoot from is just something that which I can imagine any photographer would just be like so envious of, and just want to be able to do all that kind of stuff. And there's just many other photographers, but then, like I said, going on this course allowed me to actually study their processes, study how what sort of mechanisms they used when they did the thought process that they had too when they were creating these images. I mean, a lot of things have changed over the years. You know, the sort of locations that they used are totally different now. The backdrops are different. Everything that you see in these vintage images don't exist no more, unless probably go to Cuba, which is still kind of stuck in that time. But, you know, for me, that's how I then really fully fledged became a professional photographer. You know, after attending my course, graduating, and then realizing there's nothing else. And then it also got me more into doing art photography. Before that, I was doing it, but not too much. But then going on my course, coming out, got me involved in a lot more in art photography and also in film photography. You know, I was able to then really go into dark rooms and develop my own film, you know the process of dodging and burning, which originally started from the dark room. And from film, and knowing how that related to then using it in digital Photoshop and things like that. So, you know, that was the route which I took. It wasn't a conventional sort of, you know, just woke up one morning and studied photography. It was more like, it was a sort of natural ambition and natural passion, but then going back and then studying and then coming out again with a whole different thought process. So, yeah, that's where I came from.
Yeah. And what else inspires you, or who else inspires you? You've obviously mentioned a few photographers, but anything else?
You know, I love street photography. I mean, I have tons of images of street photography, but I do get inspired by, you know, friends, people I meet, fashion, which is one of my biggest inspirations. But then, like I said, on on the streets, when I'm on the streets doing street photography myself, there's so many things on a day-to-day basis which I can see and which would just inspire me, which I could take a picture of and then come back and say, you know what, this image that I've taken, whether it's of a thing, whether it's of a building, whether it's an object, person, whatnot, can just come back and decide to do something and expand on that, elaborate on that. But I have friends that inspire me, close friends I work with that inspire me. And with, over the years, they've just given me so much more passion to do what I do. Friends who I spoke about, which I showed you an image, Susan, my friend Zazie, Carmen, my friend Simon, all these people who they're creatives themselves, and I kind of vibe off them. And obviously the photographers, which I mentioned, artists, which I love what they do. I get a lot of inspiration from art too, which, I love going to galleries. I love going to exhibitions and, seeing things from there and trying to tie them into something I would do as a photographer. People tend to think that the inspiration will only really come from other photographers themselves, but to be honest, it just comes from anything. It comes from anywhere. I could go into Sainsbury's and see some weird looking fruit and just get inspired by that. I can never really wake up and just say, these are the only things that inspire me. It comes from everywhere. You could look at the sky one day and it's a weird reddish color, and that's inspiring. You just decide you want to do something with that. So it varies. It really does vary. But I'm always open. I always tell people to, especially younger students who, I speak to, I always tell them to just be open-minded when it comes to being inspired and not try and close yourself in. Really try to grab inspiration from anywhere. And then whatever it is you create, just take from all these different things and then try and put it into your own words, your own form, your own whatever. Huh?
That brings us on quite nicely to my next question, which was any advice to young creatives? Any other advice you've got?
Well, a ton of advice, really. You remember when we had this discussion, I think we did before. For me, as much as just wanting to keep on creating, depending on what you want to do with your creative. If it's a hobby, then fair enough. Have at it. Do as much as you can do while it's a hobby. But if you want to, make a career out of whatever it is your passion is, one of the main things that you really do have to learn is the business side of it. I think we are at this moment where it's quite easy for creatives, whether it's young creatives, old creatives, whatnot. It's really easy to just get caught up in this whole social media thing where it's just caught up in the likes, caught up in the follows, caught up in people just wanting to see more and more content from you. So you just end up just producing pretty much pay-as-you-go content, for, how will I call it, fast fashion style content. It's every day you're just pumping things out there, but you're not really concentrating on the other side of it. You're just doing things to just satisfy this insatiable lust that everyone has for seeing content on a daily basis. So my advice is always to sort of take time to also understand the business of it. So if I'm talking to photographers, I always want, photographers to really, really learn the business side of photography, know how to work with clients, not just produce great images for them, but then also know how to work with them, on the administrational side of things, know how to price your images, know how to work with terms of use, work with contracts, know how to safeguard your images so that nothing's going to come back and bite you on the hiney, if you know what I mean. Know how to, in fact, know how to read clauses in contracts too. Know how to safeguard your work, future-proof it, if you know what I mean. So that is always one of my main advice that I give, because I come across it all the time. I do have people who call me up or they send me emails asking me for advice on, I've got a client who wants this, they want this amount of images, or they want to use this, blah, blah, blah. They want me to give them full copyright. They want all this kind of stuff. And for me, it's like, well, it's up to you to decide whether this is really a career for you, or if you're happy to do all that. If you're happy to do all that, then be prepared for, in the future, where it's either you see your images published somewhere where you haven't given that consent for it, and if you're going to be all right with that, or if you then want to start battling that, which means that if you had initially given the right sort of terms of use and things like that, then you won't won't get to that stage. So that's always one of the main pieces of advice. But then when it comes to the creative side, like I said before, just, we're at this time where there's just so much happening. There's so much out there. We obviously did have, these couple of months to just put everyone on standby, on hold. Some people came out of it, rocket scientists, some didn't. But whichever way it is to always stay focused, always stay motivated, and always believe that we should just continue creating, and never, let, what society, never let, how can I put it? An example being, whether it, obviously social media. I do see a lot of people who are just pressurized by social media to produce certain type of content, or just produce content in general all the time. I think we should always give ourselves a break. We're like photographers, creators, we get writer's block sometimes, or whatever the equivalent of writer's block is. And if you try to force it, it doesn't happen. So, you always have to just let it come naturally, but, just continue with what we're doing, really. And that's the advice I always give. But like I said, know the business side. I mean, I'm always learning myself, but you always got to know the business side if you intend for it to be a career. And even if you don't, it's still good to learn that stuff. You know what I mean? So if anyone has questions, holler at me.
Do you think your early career in the city was a good kind of foundation for that?
Oh yeah, definitely. To use the word, I was quite ANAL about contracts and terms and documents and things like that when I worked in the city. In fact, it was one of my main roles. I worked, in trading and settlement trading and corporate actions and things like that. I was quite young at the time too. I was just being, how can I put it? I always had them on my neck, basically, like, oh, you got to make sure, proofread this stuff. You got to make sure this is up before we send them out to whoever. We can't let this stuff come back and bite us in the ass, that kind of stuff. So I think leaving the city, I'm still left with that sort of, attitude. And then I kind of, segued that whole thing into photography. And I still have clients who, when I, talk to them about that kind of stuff, that I do get the fact that, oh, well, we haven't really worked with photographers who, but then I'm like, well, look, if you look at the top photographers in the industries who, are making a great living out of what they're doing, those are the most professional photographers you will ever come across. The ones that are actually, up there, the ones that are known, the ones that are, top of their game. You cannot mess with them when it comes to image, the way their images are used. And, I mean, those guys, they're litigious, if you know what I mean. And I've seen it happen. And I'm not on that level at all, and I don't want to be. So I try to create this balance between that stuff. But I think, yeah, definitely working years ago in that industry did put me on where I am now as a photographer. And I have no regrets, to be honest. No regrets.
Yeah, nice. Could you talk a little bit more detail about working on fashion projects, like what the process is and maybe what some of the challenges are of working in that industry?
I mean, I've been lucky enough over the recent years to work on some really great projects. Some with my friends who, especially with my friend Susan, who's a creative director. and we've worked on some really great projects together. And then with some other clients too, where, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had clients who obviously didn't know what, who didn't know what they wanted at all. And I kind of had to work with them and really sort of bring their ideas to light. And, you know, the challenges there, like I mentioned before, is we're also working with clients who wanted X, but then they were only there to sort of do, you know, Y or Z or however it comes. And then obviously me trying to then get them to understand, you know, certain aspects of this work that we do. But then I've worked on some really great projects, you know, and like I said, with some really great clients, whether it's fashion, whether it's portrait. I've been lucky enough to shoot. I mean, I'm passionate. One of my favorite publications is Vogue. You know, I've been, you know, a lover of Vogue since my mom, really, who was also a big fan at the time. And, you know, I've been able to have images in Vogue itself. And that for me is pretty much one of my career highs, which I think for any fashion photographer, you know, Vogue is always kind of like the Bible, rightly so. And, you know, it's kind of those things which we always sort of aim towards. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's tons of great publications out there, but it's just one of those sort of like benchmarks. And I've been lucky enough to have my images featured in there, working with friends, whether it's have my images of, you know, clients, have images of you know, working on articles, features. I mean, actually, if you want, I could show you. I think the one of the latest features I had in there. Just give me a sec.
Yeah, please. Sounds good.
Let me share the screen again. All right, so this I worked on with Susan Bennett, who's the creative director, and then this is IMDb, who's an amazing singer artist, UK, and we shot this for British Vogue. And she's wearing the Burberry. This was actually before this. What she's wearing right here, which is just amazing. This is from the Burberry Monogram collection, and this is prior to it actually being released. So you know, I just felt like, what, you know, I've got her. You know, Susan just she came correct with this. She came correct with the styling on this and setting this all up. So this is really cool. I mean, there's a ton of these, but, you know, and, you know, IMDb, she just, you know, at the ballpark, you can call it that. So this was from Rouge Vogue itself. And this featured late last year, I think it was, yeah. Late last year, yeah. Okay. So being able to do that, I mean, that was, I'd say, can you, hold on. Back?
Yeah.
So, you know, I felt, you know, I'm lucky enough to do that, and hopefully, obviously, going to be doing a lot more. You know, the couple of months really sort of throws things up. You know, a lot of clients don't really have the budget anymore, or not like they don't have the budget. It's like they don't really want to spend so much at the moment because obviously they're trying to see where the economy goes, and so everything's kind of frozen at the moment. Now, there's two ways that, you know, two things you could do. You could either just keep on shooting, you know, working with, you know, just doing things behind the scene and get them out. But me, I kind of chose, you know, I've done a lot of that. I've done a lot of these sort of like personal projects and things like that. I didn't really want to spend a lot of my months shooting more and more for the fact that obviously we've got this pandemic going on. So I didn't really want to be mingling too much. And for me, it's, if I am going to go out and shoot, it has to be worth my while. It has to be with a client. It has to be, everything has to be set up properly, you know, before, you know, just going out there and just shooting with someone just for the sake of shooting right now isn't happening for me right now. And I've been getting a lot of offers to do that, but I've kind of been turning that down because I'm like, you know what? I don't get out of bed for nothing less to do. No, I'm joking. But yeah, so fashion wise, I'm still growing. I'm still, I still see myself as getting to where I want to be. So I'm not there yet, but I'm still getting there, and I'm really passionate about getting on that journey. But in the meantime, it's more to do with being selective with who I work with and how I work. But I've worked on some really great projects in the past, which I have no regrets. I have some which I've been like, it didn't come out the way I wanted it to come out, or I could have done a lot better. The one thing I always do is I always second guess. Sorry, what's the word? Is it self-doubt? Second guess, whichever one you want to use. I always do that, not to crazy levels where I end up just beating myself up, but more like going back and looking at my work and thinking I could have done way better. There's so many things I could have done. It could have been so much better. Images could have been lit up differently, sharper, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But I think the main thing I always try to do when I work with my clients is understand what they want. And I think that's probably another piece of advice I'd always give, is really listen to the client, understand what the client wants from the final image, work with them, work with the mood boards, try and figure out what sort of style they're looking for, what kind of lighting they're looking for, black, white, there's so color grades, there's just so many things which come into play with that final product. And even when that final product's ready, you still have to go back and forth and deal with those kind of things. So I think when it comes to fashion photography, there's also things to know about fabric, how fabric moves, how fabric reflects light, how it flows on the body. What kind of fabric or what color of clothes are you going to shoot before the actual shoot. So whether if you're shooting in the studio, if you're shooting on a location, what's going to work with the actual, the actual styling or whatnot. So there's a lot involved, which I've seen some amazing photographers do amazing work too. So, I'm not alone in doing what I do. But I think for me, it's always just trying to create and hopefully make my mark. I think one thing we need to do is get back to creating iconic images. I don't think they exist anymore. So I'd really like get back to that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That brings us on quite nicely to a question we've had from the audience about the duration of your project. Do they vary a lot, or like how long does it take you to kind of complete the average project?
Clients,
string maybe, but
clients want stuff immediately, which is understandable. Like I said, we do live in a very fast content oriented industry at the moment. When I work on personal projects, they could take forever. I mean, I've got stuff I've been working on for 2-3 years now, which I still haven't even gotten around to complete it. I've got images which I took last year, which I haven't even finished, worked on. I mean, more personal projects. Obviously, the people I worked on with it are probably pissed off at me. They're probably watching this right now, pissed off like, yeah, I haven't got those images. But it also comes down to how I feel about it. So if I work on a personal project, the completion of it comes down to how I feel about the work itself. At the time I shoot them, I might be really excited, and then I go back, and then the whole idea I had changes. And then it's like, okay, what else can I do with this? Especially if it's an art sort of project. But with working with clients, if I'm doing a portraiture, then obviously they've got a deadline as to when they want to publish it, when it's going to, either go out on social media. And I tend to work quite quickly like that. The speed at which an image, from even before we've even shot the image, which is to do with, consultation, then doing the shoot itself, and then, the post-process, it varies. It could be anything from 4 or 5 days to 2 weeks, and it also comes down to when the clients need the images. Fashion shoots, obviously, are fairly quick. So, a lot of the times, client would want an image which they need on social media in the next 2 days. So that means I have to really be on the board. Everything has to be perfect. the better the image while it's being taken, then the easier it is to sort of, get it complete. So if the lighting's done well, and the makeup, if it's a beauty shoot, if the makeup is great, then it just means that that's less work for me to do to get the image to the client. But a lot of the times too, can be a bit of a hassle, especially if you're dealing with clients who don't really know what they want, and it's not their fault. I don't blame them, but you do have clients who don't really, they haven't. It's the first time that they're doing sort of like a campaign, whether it's a social media campaign or whatnot. So they're not really sure what they want. So working with, my creative director, or my stylist, or the agent, or whatnot, means that all that time trying to get everything perfect, the final image has to be, I need to make sure that the client is satisfied with the end product. So it just varies. Time frames always vary. I try to make it 7 to 10 days, but you never know.
We've got a few more questions from the audience. One is in relation to you speaking before about the idea of needing to have more iconic images. So the question is, what is an icon? Isn't it in the eye of the beholder? As in, the London Eye could be an icon, as could a religious icon.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's also personal. Like you said, it's in the eye of the beholder. But there are images which are known to be iconic images. What will entail it being iconic, obviously, is either to do with the creator of the image, the person who is in the image itself, whether it's a painting or the photograph, whether it's the clothes that they're wearing, the location, and this is just going on fashion. Obviously not other images, but just basically on fashion. But for me, why I say there's no more iconic images before, it's also to do with the fact that we live in a world that is very image driven. We spend on average 4 or 5 hours a day on Instagram. If you pretty much, one way or the other, if you tally the whole thing up, and you're just flicking through images. You see an image, it's on this little 5-inch screen, you look at it for a couple of seconds, you like it, whatever, make a comment, you move on. You don't remember it anymore. If you do remember, it wouldn't be, how you'd remember an image, which is quote unquote iconic. Even though you'd look at a quick Instagram image, but once you see a certain image that whether it's, let's just say, an image of, let's just say Kate Moss, Naomi Campbell, whatnot, from back in the days, you look at that image and it's iconic. Now I say iconic. No one really knows why they're called iconic or why newer images are not. But I personally feel that they don't exist anymore. Or maybe iconic images will never exist anymore. Maybe we're at that stage in our point in human history, or whatever you want to call it, that we're at that stage now where it's just every image is just literally look at it quickly, it's a campaign, boom, move on to the next image, which is pretty much with everything. It's fast fashion, fast clothes, fast content. We're very content driven at the moment. So I think people's attention spans is also quite short, in the sense that they look at something really quickly and they want something else. So that's why I say there's no more iconic images. Being able to create iconic images, it will probably be a lot harder now, because I think it's more to do with doing something that's just way out there, way out there, that you don't have the image doesn't have a choice for it to be iconic. There's a lot of work that I see right now, which is really great, but it's also quite samey, if you know what I'm trying to say. I personally look at an image and think, yeah, it's a really cool image. There's something that's not really, grabbing me. So even when I think about wanting to create iconic images myself, I still kind of imagine creating images that hark back to the old age of photography. And I think being able to create an image that when you look at it, you kind of think, wow, this reminds me of blah, blah, blah from back in the day, but with my own sort of style or whatnot to it. And then maybe, hopefully, it might be iconic. And plus, obviously, the way we view images remember back in those days, there wasn't social media. A lot of the images, you either had to go to the gallery, either had to be printed or in a magazine or whatnot. Only few people would ever get to see these images blown up at the time, in a gallery. So they had it just stood to reason that they become iconic. So yeah, like the question is, it is probably in the eye of the beholder, but I don't know. I kind of feel like we should kind of get back to doing that, maybe. I don't know. I just don't know how. You know what I mean?
Another question from the audience is, do you think having clients restricts your creativity?
Do I think having
clients restricts your creativity?
Do I have them, or do I think having clients?
Do you think having them restricts your creativity?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, look, I gotta get paid. Photography is a very expensive craft or career. Cameras of thousands of pounds, and lights of thousands of pounds. Everything about it is really expensive. So you need to have these clients to be able to, continue doing what you do. You need to have the right kind of clients to, pay the right amount so that you can upgrade your equipment when you need to, so that you can pretty much earn a salary. In this day and age, obviously, where you can see what's happened. I mean, pretty much employment has been decimated by COVID and stuff like that. So, being able to work right now is a blessing. Being able to work with paying clients is a blessing. So, whatever ideas they want, whatever it is, I'm all for it. You know what I mean? It doesn't stop me from doing what I want to do as a photographer. And luckily enough, I do come across, obviously, clients I work with, they already know what I do. They already know the sort of images I take. So, and I haven't had any clients, I have, don't get me wrong, but I haven't had that many clients who want me to just go, do something that I would never really do. But then I'm a photographer. I'm very versatile anyway. So, I whatever it is a client wants to do, I can pretty much come correct with it. But I've never seen it as stifling my creativity, because it's work. When you're working for someone or doing something for them, it's what they want. You have to be able to give them what they want, but then also along the boundaries of what that you can give them. There's no point sort of blagging something and making all these promises if you can't deliver. So, that's always my stance with it. But then when I want to get creative, I work on my own personal projects anyway, or I work with, a team and say, look, this is what we're going to do creatively. It's not for a specific client, but we can put this together and, add that to our portfolios and whatnot. So it doesn't hinder me, at all. Unless the client wants me to shoot on Mount Everest, and I don't climb mountains, so no. No.
I'm going to save up money and then try and become your client now to do that. Be like, Chuck, come on, I've got a couple. I've got one more question myself, and then I've got one more from the audience, which is about how you keep if there's any strategies for keeping the model comfortable when you're shooting them, and if that's different to if you're shooting someone who's not a professional.
Oh yeah, I love working on models, especially professional ones, because they, we're all there to do a job. If you've got a client who, sportswear, whatever it is, let's just say sportswear, which I did do a sportswear shoot actually. And which was over a couple of days, and we created some amazing images. And one of the models that we worked with, obviously, was a sportswear model. And working with models who know that they're there to do a job. Professional ones, they already know what to do. You don't really need to give, male and female, you don't really need to give too much direction. As long as you give them an outline of what needs to be done, and they'll just knock it out of the ballpark. For me, I love it, because this is a bang, 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 and just, so it's now up to me to get what I need to do right. So I need to get the lighting right. I need to get, angles, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. Stylists need to get their styling right, create, direct, everything. As long as we're all pooling our resources together, then we'll create, the amazing images that the client would need. But then when you're working with someone who's not a model, then there's obviously a lot more work just put into there. If there's one thing I love doing, is making people feel confident about themselves. Always use this analogy, which, there's something called Berocca, which is like this, what do you call these things that you put into cups of water that's supposed to make your stomach feel good or whatnot. But the tagline is always like, you, but on your good day. And for me, that's what I say. I make you look like you, but on your best day. I'm not going to try and change how you look or, like all these filters, that you see on Instagram or whatnot. But I think when you're working with someone who's not a model, then the main thing you need to do is obviously just make them feel confident in themselves, make them feel comfortable. But there's also technical things that also come into play. The kind of lenses you use also help. If you're shooting a model, or so, not a model, but if you're shooting someone who's not a model, say for a portrait setting, the kind of lens you use, the distance that you have from the person you're shooting, if you're too close to them, if you've got a wide angle lens, which means you have to be really close to them, then you're all up in their face. It's quite imposing. If you're using a long foot lens, then you're far back. Then that means you're shouting at them. If they now have to strain to hear you make commands, then it takes them out of the zone that they've kind of put themselves in. So also you've been able to use the right sort of focal length, so you're at the right distance from who you're shooting, and then you're able to, just giving them words of encouragement and, just make them feel great about themselves. Once you're able to do that, make them feel good and whatnot, then, you're able to just kind of breeze through. It's now up to you to obviously get the right sort of lights and all these other things right. I've, don't get me wrong, I've had numerous episodes in the past with portrait sitters where they've just never felt good about themselves and never liked any images which people have taken of them in the past, and they've told me beforehand that, listen, I'll just let you know, I'm a nightmare. You won't be able to get a good image of me. And in the end, I've been able to do that because I think I'm a people's person. So, you don't want to cross boundaries with a person, obviously. But then you still want to let them know that, look, I'm like you, you know what I mean? I'm like, but I'm here to make you look good. And a lot of the times I do that. I make them look great. But there's definitely is that difference between shooting, just the normal client who wants portraits, or even for corporate. I think that the hardest is shooting corporate portraits for clients, because you have a short amount of time. You're in there for pretty much 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatnot, if they give you that amount of time. So you really need to be in there beforehand, set everything up, and you really need to know how to make them relax. As soon as they walk in, it's bang, 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 they're out. And if you miss that mark that you're supposed to get them to kind of just relax themselves within pretty much 60 seconds, then you're pretty much going to get horrible pictures at the end of it. So one thing about being a photographer that you really need to learn is how to be a people's person. Unless obviously you shoot buildings or animals. But if you see pets, you still need to be a pet person. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's the difference between the two.
Great, thank you. I've got two last questions. So there's a question about how your personal art projects differ. So what the kind of direction they take is.
So with my art projects, it's it's always based on what inspires me or what I like. If you look at the two images that I used as the that I used to promote this, I can't pull it up. I don't know if you could pull that up on your IG, because if I pull up on mine, then it will just sort of be sideways.
Yeah, one sec. I'm even slower. 1 second. Yeah. Should be. Yeah, so this one.
No, so if you go to my Instagram page.
Your Instagram, sorry. Yeah.
Actually, while you're on my page, you can scroll through a bit more images. I was going to show my Instagram page, but it will just come up sideways. So the first 2 images.
Yeah, these ones.
Yeah, so if you click on that, those images. Yeah, so these images here, I use these. These were based on the project which I shot, which was actually part of my course at the time. And this is like my body. This is called my body of DigiArt project right here. And I worked with, a series of images and different people where I merged. Basically, whoever I was shooting, it was like, what are you about? So what is your, that's just pixelated. What is it that you, how can I put it? What are you about physically, or, what sort of images do you like? And then I'd take those images, I'd go and actually shoot that stuff, and I'd have it digitally, put onto their bodies. But the way I did it was, you wouldn't really, a lot of people saw, because I had these printed up and they were in an exhibition, and people thought they were actually hand painted the way I did them, but they were all done digitally. And there's a whole succession of images which were based off this big body of DigiArt, some of sort of my friends, some fellow colleagues. And, this idea, like I said, came from initially from looking at these murals, which I'd see, up on walls in different places, or see in art galleries. And I wanted to sort of, and these were things that I really liked. And I was like, how can I add this to me? How can I put it on me myself, especially with the Campbell soup and things like that, but it not just looking like some weird, something just placed it on. And I figured out how I can actually merge digital and, merge imagery and just put the whole thing together. And, when you look at it on Instagram, I mean, the stuff that I got swirling around it was done as part of the video, but the actual images themselves they're all printed up. And when you look at them in real life, you can't tell that this is all done digitally itself. So I love working, I love working with digital manipulation. I love it. For me, I'm quite, when it comes to things like that, I love being able to manipulate and merge different sort of media together and create this whole new thing. You know what I mean? Obviously, I can easily have got someone to just paint this on my face, but how many different times can I have someone paint something, wipe it off, paint something else? But being able to do it digitally and make it look so real was something I really look forward to doing. Yeah. So, when I work on different art projects, it could be, the inspiration can come from anywhere. And then when I execute it, I'd start from there, from A, and I would end up somewhere else with it. But I'm quite meticulous. I'm pretty much a nitpicker, as they say. So it could take a long while for me to complete something, because I want it to be perfect by the time I finished it. You know what I mean? Some people like that, some people don't. But I'm like, well, if it's a personal project, I don't care how long it takes, as long as it's the way I envisioned it to be.
Yeah, no, definitely. And my final question is, could you talk a little bit about future plans? Is there a designer you'd like to work with, or a project you'd like to do in the future?
No. Yeah, I mean, designers, what? I mean, the thing is, I never really specifically have a designer that I'd love to work with. Like, I think it's more, it's more creative teams that I'd like to work with, or creative directors, because when it comes to designers and, creative director would just pull different things together and, just make this amazing sort of set, or this amazing work, which I'd then like to shoot. But then designers themselves, I mean, there's always new up and coming designers. And for me, it's like, whoever I look at, I'm like, wow, I like this stuff. But, I can never really just pull a name out of the bag and say, I definitely want to work with this. I mean, magazines, for sure, there's magazines I'd love to have my images in. But designers themselves, you know, I want to work on more campaigns. I don't really have specific designers I want to work on their campaigns for at the moment. You know, maybe I used to, but right now I'm like, you know what? I just want to shoot as more campaigns as I can shoot and work with a lot of designers along the way. But fashion-wise, I mean, I love clothes. I love fashion in general. But then I'm quite, you know, I wouldn't say unique, but then, you know, I'm not a follower of specific brands or specific labels. You know, I wear what I love wearing. It could be anything from Zara to Gucci, whatever. If I like the way I look in it, you know. But one thing I love wearing a hat. So as long as I got a hat on, I'm good. I'm good to go. But I think with designers, I can never just really pinpoint one and say that's the one I want to work with, because everyone's doing just amazing stuff right now. I mean, if there's one thing I really am wanting to work a lot more with is sustainable fashion designers or sustainable brands. That is something I definitely want to get involved with. I have a friend of mine who has an amazing community called Never Fade, which is based out in Soho. And you know, the label's called Never Fade anyway. And, you know, they're doing amazing stuff with sustainable fashion. You know, you pop into the store right there. There's all these young up and coming designers who, you know, no one really knows who they are so far, but what they're doing with taking, you know, clothes that probably end up in the bin some, you know, years ago, and just bringing it back into creating amazing work with that. Now that is definitely I want to work with. My friend, in fact, I have, you know, a couple of friends who they promote sustainable fashion, you know, and, you know, I'd obviously love to work with them when they work with brands. My friend Susan, Carmen, all of them, you know. So that, I think going forward, that is something I definitely love to work a lot more. So if there's any brands that are doing the more sustainable stuff, then yeah, because then there's a much more ethical reason for working with them, because then you're part of the solution to what we're going through at the moment. You know, I mean, there's just so much clothes out there. There's just so much, and I think we've got to the stage where we now need to start recycling. And there's amazing designers, young up and coming designers out there that are just taking pretty much, you know, old stuff and turning them into new stuff, but new stuff which is still the culture, if you know what I mean. Yeah. In a long way of me going around on
it. Chuck, thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. It's been really interesting to hear more about your work. And
follow me.
We do this every time, but unfortunately, yeah, follow at Mr. Chuck Noble. Yeah, every time we normally round of applause from the audience, but seeing live, I'm going to give you a clap myself. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much to us.
Thanks for hooking this up. You know, you and the team over here, and to University of East London. Thank you guys. Hope everyone's enjoyed watching. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. Easy. Hold it down. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Easy. Hold it down. Oh my gosh. Easy. Hold it down. Oh gosh. Oh my god. Easy, easy. Yes, UK massive. Yes, UK massive.